Speed Mechanics for Lead Guitar has really become a cornerstone, a must-have book for anyone who wants high-level shred guitar technique. And it came out in 1990, so that's literally over 30 years ago, and it's still selling. It's still in print, which is actually saying a lot for a stylistic guitar method. It's become part of the guitar lexicon, of course, and I'm very happy about that, proud of that. There's a lot of firsts in that book, and so I thought I'd show you some insights into the process of how it was created. I'll show you the original manuscript and a few other things. Speed Mechanics was actually the 6th book that I got published, and I conceived of the idea around the end of 1987, started working on it 87 into 1988. So at that time, my goal was just to be able to play anything that I could imagine at any speed. Now, whether it was improvised or whether it was composed, whatever thoughts I had in my mind, whatever musical ideas I had, I of course wanted to be able to play them without struggling with the instrument, and I wanted to be able to play them reliably and at any speed. An hour or two in the morning, practicing. I was learning a lot of the Paganini caprices and perfecting my technique on the one hand, really applying the ideas that I was writing about in Speed Mechanics. So I would do that for a couple hours, and then I might, sit down at the computer that I had. I had this little Mac Plus. It was really a word processor, and I'd sit down and write out the text. That was probably the hardest thing because, I'm no Hemingway, and I find that after a couple of hours of writing, my brain would just turn to mush, and I hated writing. On the other hand, the music, of course, was easy because all I was really doing is sharing my own journey and my own interests, my own licks, my own music, and the structuring of it was easy for me too because I kind of think in those terms. I would break down what it is that I'm doing, kind of see the mechanics and perfect them a piece at a time. So I'd practice a little in the morning. I might then write for a couple of hours. Then I'd probably go to the conservatory where I taught, and I would teach a few hours there. And then a couple times a week I was in a band, and I'd go and I'd rehearse. The conservatory was in this building, this old mansion built in 1890s style, and a beautiful building. But in the upstairs would be, the respectable musicians, the pianists and the vocalists and the, violinists and so forth. And the guitarists, the classical guitarists, well, they were up there too, but all the electric guitarists were relegated to the basement. So I was down in the dungeon, with all the jazz players. And so I'd be down there with my Marshall stack cranked up and cinder block walls painted, cinder block, lots of ambience and so forth. It was actually a fun place to play loud. But I was directly under the ballroom. And the ballroom is where the choirs would rehearse. So I'd be in there sometimes at night, jamming away, playing Yngwie and stuff. And they'd be upstairs, and there's a little bleed. I could hear them a little bit, and they could hear me a little bit. Actually, come to think of it, they probably heard me an awful lot more than I heard them. I remember a few times somebody would come downstairs, wondering, what is that noise? I enjoyed that a lot. But at the conservatory, I had a lot of pretty advanced students that were on the same journey I was on. So, I would have this opportunity to kind of test out the material and how to approach, practicing to be able to get this stuff down, because not everybody learns the same. So having that hands-on experience where I would work with that material with, 4 or 5 different people, and then take those insights back and kind of write the method in that way, that really helped a lot. The big breakthrough, I think, of Speed Mechanics came in the form of isolating the elements, the different components that went into playing. Because, music engages the part of your mind that is anything but analytical. I mean, it engages the momentum, and you get into this headspace of flow where it's creating something that has an emotional impact. And yes, you want to be sensitive to that, obviously, that's the whole point. But at the same time, we're also engaged in a mechanical process of playing the instrument. And in order to do that really well, it helps if we can look at and analyze and break it apart into its components so that we can work on each piece, and perfect each bit, each piece of that puzzle. So then when we put all the puzzle pieces back together, you can play a lot better. And then, of course, ideally, you can forget about the analytics of it and just play the music. But there was a lot of firsts, like the inside and outside picking, understanding the mechanics, the picking mechanics that are involved in the different phrases and so forth. I also went to other styles. I had a book called Art of Practicing that I had gotten when I was experimenting with classical guitar. And that book really touched on some of the deeper principles of how practice works and what practice is and how to practice effectively. And of course, I had applied those myself, and I was going to then pull those ideas and apply them here to lead guitar. I also even read about violin and piano pedagogy, what some people had to say about those more established systems of teaching and what worked there. And again, brought some of that to bear on lead guitar. I had worked with Will Schmidt as the editor at Hal Leonard. Now, Will had done all of the basic guitar methods, and he was the editor there. Now, I should mention something about what an editor does. An editor does a lot of different things depending on the needs of the project, but basically it's the editor's job to take the manuscript, which is the raw material, and turn it into what is going to be in the finished book. I've been on both sides of the fence, actually. I've been an author working with editors, but I've also edited a number of books working with other authors. I edited some of the Musicians Institute core curriculum and a bunch of other books for the publisher over the years. So on the one hand, if the manuscript is really solid, well structured, it doesn't really need editing. The editor's job basically just becomes, well, I'm going to proof it, correct the misspellings, maybe fix an awkward sentence structure or something, but that's pretty much it. And that's kind of what Will did with my original manuscripts. I have them here, and if you look at them, you can see that there really wasn't any changes. What Will did was really kind of just make sure everything was okay, and then handed it off to the engravers, with some technical specifications so that they would understand, what to do with it to get it the way he thought it should be, and the way I thought it should be too. Well, in 1988, when I was working on Speed Mechanics, Will was no longer available. He had moved on. So they set me up with an outside editor, and this was a woman out on the West Coast who, in fact, wasn't a guitarist at all, which was kind of an interesting situation, because what would happen is I would write the text and explain what I wanted to explain, and I would send it to her. I'm thinking, well, I'm done. And it would come back, and she would have marks all over everything, and she would give me maybe some rewritten sentences, or maybe she didn't understand what I was saying and she just put a question mark or write a question in the margin to get me to specify something more. And at first this was really frustrating because, she's not getting what I'm saying. But I realized really right away, well, if she's not understanding it, then obviously I haven't done a good enough job explaining it, because I want anybody who picks up this book to be able to understand what I'm saying, whether they play not at all, or a little bit, or a lot, that shouldn't matter. It was a little problematic, though, because she was, very red pen happy, and if I put the dependent clause at the beginning of a sentence, she'd put it at the end, and if I put it at the end of a sentence, she'd put it at the beginning, and so there was probably a lot of changes that, in retrospect, I don't think were all that important. But what was really valuable was that she was involved in this process, so that we went back and forth, because I would write it, it would come back to me, and then I would look at her comments, her questions, or how she's revised the sentence, and I could see, well, I see what she's doing to the sentence, and yeah, that's a better wording, but in the process of the wording, she has changed the meaning. So obviously she didn't understand the meaning. Now the question becomes, how do I rewrite it to have good sentence structure and explain the meaning I want to explain? And after enough back and forth, I think I finally achieved that. In fact, I was very happy to see years later a guitar player who was also a journalist was doing a review of the book and had mentioned to me how amazed he was at the clarity of the text in the writing, that I was able to pack so much information in so densely and explain it so clearly with relatively few words. And so I think that was a direct result of working with this editor who wasn't a guitarist. And here's the original manuscript of Speed Mechanics. Table of contents, printed out from a Mac Plus that I used at the time. About the author, acknowledgments page, forward, and as you can see here, I'm literally taping this right to the page, so I would just leave space and then tape in, draw and tape in what I wanted. So this is all introduction. Looks like my tape is yellowing a bit here. And there's our part 1, mechanical ability and basic motions, and there's my exercise 1. Had a little cassette symbol, and that's how it first came out. CDs weren't even a thing back then. So and then we moved on to the next part, the trill exercises. There they are. And then legato, hammering onto a new string. Sequences, as you can see, pretty much exactly what the book wound up being. And I laid it out page by page, what I wanted on there. So that's how we did it. Not glamorous at all, actually quite a bit of hard work, and it took a lot of time. But, you know, time well spent. I'm glad that I did it. Writing the books definitely helped me organize my thinking and take it a step further. So, you know, that was good. And it was really something for me to work on to perfect my technique. And around the time I finished Speed Mechanics and did the recording, you know, I was finally reaching that place where I could pretty much play whatever I wanted. So it was awesome for that. And in the next video, I'll show you the guitar I used to play. The recording, of course, was the fun part of the book. And it took me a couple of months to record it. I recorded on a Tascam 388, actually, which was an 8-track tape machine combined with an 8-track mixer, and those two things kind of stuck together in one unit. And anyway, that's what I used for Speed Mechanics, recorded it in my own home studio there. So that's pretty much it. In the next video, I'll show you the guitar I used to record it.